Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is mindset, and we're going to talk about optimal arousal for optimal performance. So the term arousal in the lifting world is in regards to kind of your nervous system excitement, how fired up and ready you are to kind of crush whatever activity you're taking on. So that's what we're going to look for is what is being maybe too fired up, what is not being fired up enough, and in what situations do we need which. So, correct arousal, correct kind of like excitement is extremely important for performance. Now, that can be performance in the moment and even performance in the future. So, if we control our excitement levels and are getting fired up and crazy things, as we lead into a competition, there is a way to control that per individual that allow you to best peak on the day of the competition. It's a little bit different per person. If somebody's naturally fired up, their pathway to best performance on a meet day or competition day is going to be different than somebody who's naturally not really fired up and they're more of a timid person. So someone who's more timid may need to learn how to fire themselves up more often, so that way they can turn it on the day of a competition. Whereas if somebody's naturally just a little psychotic and they get fired up and they're ready to go all the time, they need to turn that off as much as they can in their training. So that way on the day of the meet, they'll actually have it as like a performance aid rather than it just feeling like it always is there. But there's also some degree of truth to needing it to be on somewhat so that we learn how to control it. So there's this balance. That's what we're going to look at today. I want to kind of discuss situations of correct and incorrect arousal, and then talk about just variances you'll have throughout time, and then maybe some ideas on how to bring up your arousal. And this is really intended to just bring your awareness to this being a factor. And then how you would do it per individual is different. So I can't give you a prescription necessarily in this podcast, or at least I didn't prepare to do so, because it would be different per person. So some of the things I say might be right for some and wrong for others. I'd rather just give you awareness and have you guys practice it on your own. So, examples of incorrect arousal. It would be if I was too psyched up to the point where maybe at a competition, maybe it's a lifting competition, so I would be so psyched up and so freaking ready to go, like do my deadlift, for example, that I would walk up there, I would bend down, grab the bar, and just rip it off the floor. But I would have forgotten to do my breathing. I may have forgotten to put my hips and knees in the right position. I may have forgot what the heck kind of muscle pattern I'm pulling through. I might have forgot to get tight against the bar, so I just yanked on the loose bar and it pulled me forward out of position. Or maybe we get over arousal in a squat. We're just fired up to do the squat. All of a sudden we drop too low. We end up tearing our ACL or tearing something in your leg because you weren't braced properly. So an example of too much arousal would be where you get so fired up that you forget to pay attention to your technique. So that would be an example. Another one in the world of CrossFit. So I do train CrossFit coaches and athletes, and we'll get them ready for some kind of event where there is a pacing element to the event. Well, if they're too fired up, they go out like a bat out of hell, they burn out and they die because they didn't pace themselves correctly. So that can be another issue. If you think of aesthetics, this might be a little bit of an odd way of looking at this, but I've seen this happen with aesthetic competitors who have to have specific posing in the sense of kind of showing off muscle and trying to get like as grainy and hard looking as you can. So if you think of classic physique and bodybuilding as opposed to, say, bikini, where you're posing in bikini, but you're not trying to flex super duper hard. You're trying to get positions correct and maybe show certain muscles and curves, but you're not sitting there cranking down, flexing really hard on a specific muscle. In the categories in which somebody has to flex very hard, specifically into a muscle, they tend to sometimes, if they're overexcited, they'll flex super freaking hard, say like on, let's say I'm most muscular, they'll flex really freaking hard on their chest and arms and traps and kind of their whole upper body, but they'll forget to flex their legs. So they're overexcited, they're super like aroused, and they're like, I'm gonna kill this pose. And they forget that there's more to the pose than just the one set of muscles they're thinking of. So over arousal can cause problems in which you forget your baseline information. So you're excited, you're ready to do the thing, you're fired up, your adrenaline's high, your aggression's high, endorphins are high, but you forget the technicality of the thing that you're doing. Too little arousal is where somebody's going to do the exercise or the event or whatever, technically correct, but they kind of aren't doing it to the best of their abilities. So you'll see this oftentimes with people if in like performance lifting, is they'll get under a bar, they'll kind of squat correctly, but they're moving like 3 seconds down, slight pause at the bottom. They're coming up with whatever speed they need. So you can hear my voice. So that's how they move. They move ho-hum, slow and steady, but that does not maximize explosiveness. So if they have an explosive activity, they're going to do shit. They're going to do horrible because there is no explosivity in their actions and their mindset. So if somebody's under aroused, again, that also can allow them to feel higher degrees of anxiety. Because instead of just being like, I'm going to freaking crush this, I can't wait to go, da 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 da, they're going to go, I wonder if I mess up. What if I forget this? What if everybody thinks I'm a failure? So they get into that Eeyore mode. And they just kind of they're not really there, they're not really ready. So they know all the technical stuff. They'll usually get the technique pretty good, but they're not ready to crush the technique, to do like optimally their best. So when you look at optimal arousal, there is too aroused, like too much, and there is too little arousal, too little. So optimal means what is the right amount of arousal for the moment I am in. So let's look at this at different moments. So we just talked about competition examples, and in competitions, you do want to have typically higher degrees of arousal. Now, for some people, they are naturally aroused in the sense that they're going to kind of just be naturally fired up, psyched up, ready to go. So I am one of these people where I do not need anybody talking to me at like, come on, man, you can do this, you can crush this. I'll probably look at them and just tell them to shut up. So I actually will naturally get over aroused in the sense that I actually have a hard time feeling my body when I do competitions. So my internal excitement, like I'll have a conversation like I'm having right now with somebody, and I can even fall asleep before events. So the external vision or view that you would see of my arousal almost looks like I'm not paying attention. But internally, my body is so fired up, like my aggression and adrenaline are so high, my endorphins are so high, that I actually will not feel my body. So I've torn muscles in competitions and then not noticed it until like days later. Or I've torn multiple muscles in a single lift, and I definitely felt it, but it almost took like the rest of the day or another day or two to fully feel what all happened. So I did a competition semi-recently within the last year or so where I tore 2 muscles. I didn't know I tore the second one until a day or two later when all of a sudden I could feel it, and I'm like, oh, what the hell? When did that happen? So I'm somebody who I have a high degree of arousal naturally. So I absolutely do not need to be pushed up in arousal on a day of competition. Now I have other clients where on the day of competition they're pretty timid. They're not really sure how things are going to go. They're uncertain of their abilities. So you need to kind of talk them up a little bit and build them up. So there's a degree of competition arousal that is specific to competition, meaning you're fired up, you're ready to go, you're excited, but you can still remember your technique. So it's a really high edge of arousal, but just making sure that it's not too high you forget your technique. Whereas when you're practicing or in regular training, you want a very low level of arousal, almost zero. So in the sense that you want to be purely focused on technique, you're not trying to numb yourself to any of the elements of the day. So you want to feel everything that's going on so you can navigate and manage everything. So that way you get better at technique. Maybe you want to like keep your arousal so low that you can feel exactly where you're at balance-wise in your feet during a certain lift, or maybe you can make sure you're actually flexing all the muscles rather than a couple muscles being relaxed. So You want minimal arousal in practice, but you want maximum arousal in competition, within the limits of it still being correct. So obviously we don't want minimal arousal where you have no energy and effort whatsoever in training, and we don't want maximum arousal where you go past your technique cues. But in regards to the window that is still appropriate for you, you want the bottom of the window in practice, you want the top of the window in competition. That's going to help a lot, okay? Same thing if you think of aesthetic training. So somebody's training for bodybuilding or body shaping. If they're too aroused, like too excited, their energy's too high in training, they're not going to have that mind-muscle connection. They're not going to be able to focus in on the muscle that they want to be contracting, releasing. They're just going to be kind of throwing the weight around, which doesn't optimize their training results. So they won't get the maximum effects of their training if they're too aroused. They're going to be too excited, just go into the gym, fire up everything, throw everything around, and leave all fired up thinking they did a good job when they actually didn't focus in on the muscles themselves. So this becomes an issue if you think of in training for aesthetics and training for strength, if we want minimum arousal. But what most people do is they take pre-workouts with caffeine, and enough caffeine to like kill a horse kind of thing, is it basically makes them bounce off the walls, go psychotic. And then how in the hell are you going to keep your arousal levels down enough to have good mind-muscle connection or good body awareness in strength training? So I'm actually a big advocate, big proponent of not using pre-workouts, because overwhelmingly most people overuse them and abuse them, and people accidentally or unintelligently, and I don't mean that as in they're dumb, they just don't know they're doing it. So ignorant, I guess, would be without the negative connotation. But people will unknowingly, there you go, that might be a better one. They'll unknowingly tie in energy and motivation. Meaning that in order for them to feel motivated for their workout, they'll murder themselves with caffeine. So they'll try to get their nervous system so jacked up and so antsed up so that way they feel motivated to train. Motivation is not the same as energy. You need to be able to feel motivated to train even when you don't have energy. And I actually would argue that everybody should learn how to train when they're tired. Learn how to train without energy. And what I don't mean like underfed and not fueled well and all that bullshit. I just mean try to work out without taking a pre-workout. If you feel like you have to take a pre-workout or some kind of caffeine supplement every time you work out, you are mentally weak. You are not mentally strong. You are not disciplined. You are not motivated. You should be able to work out without a pre-workout if you want to. Doesn't mean you have to all the time. But you absolutely should be able to work out without having to take something beforehand. If you can't do that, then you need to work on your mental discipline. You need to work on what true motivation actually is. Motivation is not blinded, crazy energy. Motivation is saying, I want the results of this training so bad that I'm willing to put myself through the training. I'm willing to do the work to get the result. I'm willing to do that work whether I have energy or not. I'm willing to do that work whether it's 5 a.m. or 5 p.m. I'm willing to do that work whether I want to or don't want to, whether I'm busy or not. I'm willing to do the work in whatever situation is presented to me because I want the results. That is mental toughness. So if you don't think you can work out without taking a pre-workout, it's time to toughen up, okay? So by learning to do that, it'll teach you how to manage your arousal levels. And it helps you reduce feeling burned out and fatigued all the time. If every time you work out, you jack up your arousal in your nervous system, your adrenaline and endorphins, you're going to feel like shit when you come down from that crash, okay, from that high. You're going to come down from that crash, and then all of a sudden the next time you try to work out, you're going to kind of go all the way back up, come all the way back down again, and you actually fatigue your body. You fatigue your adrenal systems, a whole bunch of other stuff going on, so we're not going to get into the science of it. But you actually limit your recovery and you limit your performance because eventually caffeine doesn't work all the time. So can I get an amen from every adult who's busy and realizing that they can drink a pot of coffee and still fall asleep? So caffeine does not work all the time. So if you feel like you need that to be motivated, you're going to end up drinking more and more and more. You're eventually going to burn out your adrenal glands. You're going to feel fatigued. You're going to feel burned out from training. You're not going to want to train. You're going to quit because you were using the aid as your motivation rather than your own damn self, okay? Your own mind. So, examples of correct arousal, like we said, are the highest window of arousal that you still remember technique. That is competitions. But in practice and in training, okay, to get ready for competitions, you want the minimal amount of arousal. So that way you can best focus on your technique, best focus on mind-muscle connection, and like we said, an example of CrossFit where you have things that are pacing-based, you want to be minimally aroused so you can best find your pacing. If you can find the correct pacing in the lowest arousal level, then when you apply that in the highest arousal level, you'll crush your previous best, okay? So, arousal control, like we said, is don't try to use energy, okay, as motivation. Energy is not motivation. Using a shit ton of caffeine or getting super duper psyched up to work out is not motivation. That's weakness. That's actual weakness. So you want to get rid of that. Also think of rehab training. If you're trying to rehab an injury or rehab a specific issue, you want to be in the most minimalist arousal possible so that way you can best feel if that injury is being stressed or strained. So if you get over arousal for rehab training, you will just make shit worse because you're probably going to overdo it. I'm speaking from experience, by the way. So you have to learn how to train not aroused, without energy. You have to learn how to train when you could choose to fall asleep, but you're going to try to work out anyhow. So that's the idea. Part of that, the benefit of that, is like we said, is saving it for competition. If you train in sub-arousal levels, it allows you to then feel like maximum arousal will be a performance aid on competition day. So everybody's trying to find, how do I get the best of myself on competition day? A very significant component, ridiculously significant, is arousal control. If you're not optimally aroused, you will not perform optimally. So you have to practice arousal control. You have to practice training in different states of arousal so that way you know what is best for you in which situation. So there's a certain level of arousal for rehab training. There's a certain level for just general training. There's a certain level for competitions. You need to be able to pick which level is appropriate for what moment you're in. And by being able to control different levels, you'll be able to control the pros and cons of each level. So if you never get high arousal and then you just turn it on, turn it on every now and then, you might end up overdoing it and forgetting your techniques. If you never train at sub levels, okay, you're never going to learn your technique well because you're never going to feel your freaking technique because you're all fired up and going crazy. So that can be something that is holding you back from your results in your training is inoptimal, or not optimal, I guess, arousal levels. And something that can be holding you back in your competitions is being over aroused. Okay? So you need to practice all situations. You need to learn how to not be a complete psychopath to the point where you lose your technique, but you also need to learn not to be a total like wallflower to where you have no excitement, no energy, no aggression, no explosivity. So you need to learn how to be aware of your arousal levels and then learn how to control them as best you can. So I do this in many different ways. So like I said, I do not take caffeine supplements for training. I take them for daily energy sometimes, but I don't take them specific to training. I only use that on days of competitions if I feel like I need to. But like I said, I'm a type that needs to control my arousal. I'm already too psyched up for training for competitions. So the last competition I did, I took 0 caffeine because I was already freaking fired up and ready to go. I didn't want to get too much. So what I'll do is in training, I try to train without any caffeine supplementation based on arousal. So without any caffeine with the goal of trying to get me psyched up for training. I also train with very calm music and or just listening to an audiobook for business. So the last workout I did, I was listening to an audiobook about communication and how to be persuasive in conversation, but without manipulating somebody, just trying to say what you want to say, how you want to say it best. So that was a very good kind of like section of the book I was listening to. in the sense of trying to use efficient language. So if you're giving like a presentation, you want to say what the presentation is going to be for. You can even bring up what conclusion you're going to make, and then you talk about the gap there in between. So I'm going to say like, hey, today I'm here to talk about optimal training arousal. The conclusion we're going to come to is that it's different per person, and you need to learn what works best for you. So let's talk today about the differing levels of arousal and how you can best find what works for you. And then you would talk into the conversation. But that way, the people, the listeners, they know what you're doing, what you're talking about, they know where you're going, and now they know a context. So every statement you make within the conversation, they know what to attach it to and where it's going, what direction we're going. So it allows the listener to be more proactive and also be more engaged. You can also ask rhetorical questions. That helps people feel engaged even though you don't want an answer. But there was all that stuff, okay, and I got way off topic there. But I was listening to all of that while I was working out. And that is something that helps me control my excitement levels. So if you want to bring down your arousal levels, okay, number one, you can just not listen to music, but you're going to get most likely interrupted by people. So have headphones in anyhow. And I've actually had headphones in my head and not listened to anything before. It was just a signal to say, leave me alone. So you can listen to no music. You can listen to very calm music. You can also just listen to an audiobook. So some people in their pathway to learning mental toughness, they'll try to work out listening to like Britney Spears and say, look how hardcore I am. I can work out listening to Britney Spears instead of like actual good music. I would say no offense to Britney Spears, but that's not good music. So they'll do something almost as an anti-arousal, but they use that as fuel to be psyched up. So, for example, they're like, I'm so damn tough, I can work out to anything. I'm going to work out to Britney Spears. Well, you're still acting like a jackass. You're still all psyched up. You're just now psyched up as an like, I'm cool because I'm doing something different kind of thing. You might as well listen to the damn good music if you're going to get all psyched up, okay? So we're talking about calm music as in actually just something you enjoy, but it doesn't make you all psyched up and, like, want to punch people in the face. So, for example, I like Motown. Motown music is freaking awesome, by the way. Great dance music. If you can't dance to Jackson 5, you don't know how to dance. So, sometimes I'll listen to Motown music, like Jackson 5 type stuff, and I'm enjoying my workout. But is Rockin' Robin going to get me to do a 1-rep max all fired up and aggressive? No. So, Jackson 5 does not make me like psycho. It just makes me enjoy my workout. So, you can do something that allows you to enjoy your workout, but try to pick stuff that's not like super duper arousal. So that would be one option, okay? So another one is just training with a good friend. Training with a good friend, kind of BSing a little bit. Don't talk about the shit of life. So don't talk about stresses and worries and concerns and finances and stuff. Just talk about fun things and just enjoy your training, but not trying to get all psyched up. So if you practice that, it's going to help you then when you need to have a very specific type of arousal. You will have practiced low, medium, and high, be able to call upon them in whichever situation you're in, and be able to control the pros and cons of each. So like we said, the con of being too aroused is forgetting technique. The con of being under aroused is you allow anxiety and fear to get in there. So you have to learn how to live in all those situations and learn how to control them. So that is the idea of this podcast. Hopefully it helped a little bit in terms of raising your awareness to maybe a potential disconnection between your arousal and the moments you find yourself in. So maybe that's why you're not performing optimally. You're too aroused or under aroused for the moment you're in. And also we gave you some ideas on, pros and cons and ways to control it. So that's what you want to do is you want to start being aware of your arousal level. Understanding that it is variable and you can control that. So you can control what your level of arousal you're at. So now that you know it, now that you know you can control it, start practicing it, okay? Practice it in various situations and see what level of arousal works best for the optimal results that you want. So it might not be super duper fun to train like in a low arousal state, but if you notice you can feel your technique better and you can feel better mind-muscle connection, then why would you not do that? If you can get better results from a lower arousal level, that's what you should do, okay? So If you have any questions on this or if you want any more detailed information, always email us at brutalironGym@gmail.com and we'll help you out. So thank you for listening to this. If there's anything you need to make it more useful, please let us know. So, if you like this podcast, please share it with family and friends. The more people we help, the happier the world will be. Also, if you like this information, you can find more from us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Brutal Iron Gym. And if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. This podcast is for you, so we want to know what you want to learn about. And you can tell us at our email at brutalirongym@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.